Many dog owners who dress their dogs in coats have the best intentions. They have noticed, perhaps, that their dog resists going outside when it rains. It seems reasonable to extrapolate from that observation to the conclusion that he dislikes the rain. He dislikes the rain. What is meant by that? It is that he must dislike getting the rain on his body, the way many of us do. But is that a sound leap? In this case, there is plenty of seeming evidence from the dog himself. Is he excited and wagging when you get the raincoat out? That seems to support the leap. Or instead, the conclusion that he realizes that the appearance of the coat predicts a long-awaited walk. Does he flee from the coat, curl his tail under his body, and duck his head? Undermines the leap, though does not discredit it outright. Does he look bedraggled when wet? Does he shake the water off excitedly? Neither confirmatory nor disconfirming. The dog is being a little opaque. Here, the natural behavior of related wild canines proves the most informative about what the dog might think about a raincoat. Both dogs and wolves have clearly their own coats permanently affixed. One coat is enough. When it rains, wolves may seek shelter, but they do not cover themselves with natural materials. That does not argue for the need for or interest in raincoats. And besides being a jacket, the raincoat is also one distinctive thing, a close, even pressing covering of the back, chest, and sometimes the head. There are occasions when wolves get pressed upon the back or head. It is when they are being dominated by another wolf or scolded by an older wolf or relative. Dominants often pin subordinates down by the snout. This is called muzzle biting and accounts perhaps for why muzzled dogs sometimes seem preternaturally subdued. And a dog who stands over another dog is being dominant. The subordinate dog in that arrangement would feel the pressure of the dominant animal on his body. The raincoat might well reproduce that feeling. So the principal experience of wearing a coat is not the experience of feeling protected from wetness. Rather, the coat produces the discomforting feeling that someone higher ranking than you is nearby. This interpretation is borne out by most dogs' behavior when getting put into a raincoat. They may freeze in place as they are dominated. You might see the same behavior when a dog resisting a bath suddenly stops struggling when he gets fully sodden or covered with a heavy wet towel. The bejacketed dog may cooperate in going out, but not because he has shown he likes the coat. It is because he has been subdued. Authors note, this is similar to what was discovered by mid-century behaviorist researchers who exposed laboratory dogs to an electric shock from which they couldn't escape. Later, put in a chamber from which there was a visible escape route and shocked again, these dogs showed learned helplessness. They did not try to avoid the shock by escaping. Instead, they froze in place, seemingly resigned to their fate. The researchers had essentially trained the dogs to be submissive and accept their lack of control of the situation. They later forced the dogs to unlearn the response and end the shock. Happily, the days of experiments wherein we shock dogs to learn about their responses are over. And he will wind up being less wet, but it is we who care about the planning for that, not the dog. The way around this kind of misstep is to replace our anthropomorphizing instinct with a behavior reading instinct. In most cases, this is simple. We must ask the dog what he wants. You need only know how to translate his answer. A tick's view of the world. Here is our first tool to getting that answer, imagining the point of view of the dog. The scientific study of animals was changed by a German biologist of the early 20th century named Jakob von Uexküll. What he proposed was revolutionary. Anyone who wants to understand the life of an animal must begin by considering what he called their Umwelt, their subjective or self-world. Umwelt captures what life is like as the animal. Consider, for instance, the lowly deer tick. Those of you who have spent long minutes hesitatingly petting the body of a dog for the telltale pinhead that indicates a tick swollen with blood may have already considered the tick. And you probably consider the tick as a pest, period, barely even an animal. Von Uxküll considered instead what it might be like from the tick's point of view. A little background. Ticks are parasites, members of the family Arachnida, a class that includes spiders and insects. They have 4 pairs of legs, a simple body type, and powerful jaws. Thousands of generations of evolution have paired their life to the straightforward: birth, mating, eating, and dying. Born legless and without sex organs, they soon grow these parts, mate, and climb to a high perch, say a blade of grass. Here's where their tale gets striking. Of all the sights, sounds, and odors of the world, the adult tick is waiting for just one. It is not looking around. Ticks are blind. No sound bothers the tick. Sounds are irrelevant to its goal. It only awaits the approach of a single smell, a whiff of butyric acid, a fatty acid emitted by warm-blooded creatures. We sometimes smell it in sweat. It might wait here for a day, a month, or a dozen years, but as soon as it smells the odor it is fixed on, it drops from its perch. Then a second sensory ability kicks in. Its skin is photosensitive and can detect warmth. The tick directs itself toward warmth. If it's lucky, the warm, sweaty smell is an animal, and the tick grasps on and drinks a meal of blood. After feeding once, it drops, lays eggs, and dies. The point of this tale of the tick is that the tick's self-world is different than ours in unimagined ways, what it senses or wants, what its goals are. To the tick, the complexity of persons is reduced to 2 stimuli, smell and warmth, and it is very intent on those 2 things. If we want to understand the life of any animal, we need to know what things are meaningful to it. The first way to discover this is to determine what the animal can perceive, what it can see, hear, smell, or otherwise sense. Only objects that are perceived can have meaning to the animal. The rest are not even noticed, or all look the same. The wind that whisks through the grasses. Irrelevant to the tick. The sounds of a childhood birthday party doesn't appear on its radar. The delicious cake crumbs on the ground leave the tick cold. Second, how does the animal act on the world? The tick mates, waits, drops, and feeds. So the objects of the universe for the tick are divided into ticks and non-ticks, things one can or cannot wait upon, surfaces one might or might not drop onto, and substances one may or may not want to feed on. Thus, these 2 components, perception and action, largely define and circumscribe the world for every living thing. All animals have their own Umwelten, their own subjective realities, what von Uxküll thought of as soap bubbles with them forever caught in the middle. We humans are enclosed in our own soap bubbles too. In each of our self-worlds, for instance, we are very attentive to where other people are and what they are doing or saying. By contrast, imagine the tick's indifference to even our most moving monologues. We see in the visual range of light, we hear audible noises, and we smell strong odors placed in front of our noses. On top of that, each individual creates his own personal Umwelt, full of objects with special meaning to him. You can most clearly see this last fact by letting yourself be led through an unknown city by a native. He will steer you along a path obvious to him but invisible to you. But the 2 of you share some things. Neither of you is likely to stop and listen to the ultrasonic cry of a nearby bat. Neither of you smells what the man passing you had for dinner last night, unless it involved a lot of garlic. We, the ticks, and every other animal dovetail into our environment. We are bombarded with stimuli, but only a very few are meaningful to us. The same object, then, will be seen, or better, sensed, some animals do not see well or at all, by different animals differently. A rose is a rose is a rose, or is it? To a human, a rose is a certain kind of flower, a gift between lovers, and a thing of beauty. To the beetle, a rose is perhaps an entire territory with places to hide, on the underside of a leaf, invisible to aerial predators, hunt in the head of the flower where ant nymphs grow, and lay eggs in the joint of the leaf and stem. To the elephant, it is a thorn, barely detectable underfoot. And to the dog, what is a rose? As we'll see, this depends upon the construction of the dog, both in body and brain. As it turns out, to the dog, a rose is neither a thing of beauty nor a world unto itself. A rose is undistinguished from the rest of the plant matter surrounding it unless it has been urinated upon by another dog, stepped on by another animal, or handled by the dog's owner. Then it gains vivid interest and becomes far more significant to the dog than even the well-presented rose is to us.